the more that I've delved into some of these fundamental stories, the more bottomless they become. The Cain and Abel story is particularly like that. It's 10 lines long. You could spend 10 years thinking about that story. It's so deep. It's almost impossible for me to imagine how a story that profound could be reduced to something that finite. It's mind-boggling. And of course, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is the same. It's like there's a reason we can't forget that story. Now, who knows what there's many reasons. Who knows what those reasons are?
Is it in our DNA somewhere?
Well, look, at minimum, you could make a biological claim, something like, and it's kind of the same claim that Richard Dawkins makes with regards to memes. See, I've always thought with Dawkins that if Dawkins thought a little harder, he would have turned into Carl Jung, because there's very little difference between the idea of a meme and an archetype. An archetype is, Jung's archetype is what you would consider a meme if you thought about what a meme was for 20 years. Right, so Dawkins came up with this interesting idea, the meme. It's like, yeah, but that's an idea that needs to be fleshed out a lot, because then you might think, well, there's a hierarchy of memes. There's some that are memorable for a while, and then you forget them, and then there's some that are way more memorable, and then right at the top there are memes that you will never forget. Then the question is, why would you never forget them? There's a reason for that, and the answer is something like, well, they're structured so that they're, well, this is a truism in some sense, they're structured such that they're maximally memorable. But then that begs the question, why are they maximally memorable? Why is it that your memory is structured to not forget exactly that? And that's where you get tangled into the evolutionary arguments, like, well, your memory evolved. It's actually a tool. The reason you have memory isn't to remember the past. The reason you have memory is to not do the same stupid things again in the future. That's fundamentally the reason. And so you remember some things and you don't remember other things. And your memory has a shape, and these stories fit into that shape. And so at minimum, the stories have evolved to adapt to your memory. Now, I would say since your memory has evolved to adapt to the world, that implies that the stories have evolved to adapt to the world. And I think that's a perfectly credible biological case. One of the things I did manage to do, because Sam often is considered the scientist between him and I, he's the scientist in the discussion, and that's actually a misapprehension in some sense, because I've just never got around to the science in our discussions for all sorts of different reasons. But I'm very familiar with the relevant neuroscience literature that underpins what we know about human cognitive processing, the neuroscience of emotion, motivation, and cognition, and published quite widely in that field. So I managed to make at least the outlines of my biological case for the existence of such things as archetypes and profound narratives. And I think it's the best reflection of the current science, as well as working on the metaphorical level of analysis. But people will be able to judge that for themselves once we release the videos, and that should be something in August, sometime in August, once they're produced properly and the sound is edited and all of that.
And these archetypes help us survive at the end of the day.
Well, that's the argument, is that,
right.
Well, great stories are patterns of adaptive behavior. They're representations of patterns of adaptive behavior. And they work at multiple levels of, that's called, I don't know how to pronounce it, I've only read it, polysemy, P-O-L-Y-S-E-M-Y. The fact that a great story is true at multiple levels of analysis simultaneously. And you see this even in popular culture, like if you watch a show like The Simpsons, an animated show, kids can watch it, but there's content for adults. You can interpret it at different levels of analysis. And truly great stories can be interpreted at multiple levels of analysis simultaneously. That's actually what gives them depth. So when you say a story is deep, well, here's a meaning. Oh, look, here's another. Oh, look, here's another one. And then the meanings often exist in parallel with one another. And great stories, and the really archetypal stories are like that. The story of Moses, for example, that's an archetypal story. The idea that people escape from tyranny, go through a crisis, spend time wandering in the desert, are moving towards a better place. It's like that's the story of life.